This is the assembly instructions for anyone who has this Supermicro SuperServer 5028D-TN4T and they want to see how WiredZone assembles their system. Meaning from when you unbox it and put all the parts up, like I've done here, to 32 gig DIMMs, for instance, video card by VisionTech with 3 4K outputs, and the goodies that the TinkerTry'd bundle has included. $8 cable, but then you'd have to pay shipping and wait for it if you want it at a later date. It's a 6 SATA cable they really should have included in the SuperServer by Supermicro in the first place. A couple of stickers, and if you want to go with VMware someday, it's handy to have this compact little USB that sticks out the front barely at all. Okay, so let me set those aside. And we're going to focus this video on what do you do to assemble, get the unit ready for the customer who wants their Windows 10 preload on their Samsung SSD. Okay, so I'm going to set those thumb screws aside. And I'm also going to point out that we do have another key part that's going to get installed. There you go, Samsung 850 EVO in whatever size you pick. This one happens to be 2 terabytes. It's a doozy. Now as you take these thumb screws out, they might be tight and you might need a screwdriver, but here's the thing, a couple of tips. Get your thumbs on the side and push on the back plate. Flip this little lever up a little as you pull back, and now it becomes easy to take the cover right off. I have other videos that do a deep dive in the system. This one's just focused on assembly. Not some sort of intense training on all the features of the machine, just how do you get it ready. So what we have next is these DIMMs are going into the blue slots. Clips are done. That side of the server is completed. I want to make sure the the white plastic clips are all the way up and it's secure. That's it for assembly on that side of the system. Let's move it around now and focus on the hard drive. Samsung. It's going to go right here. Now if you haven't found the cables like I've shown in this picture, you might find them routed a little differently. If you find them all routed through here, out the top, that's fine, but it makes it a little hard to get that second drive its power on the side, should the customer use this bay someday. So I find it a lot better to just free that up and slide it in through this little gap here, and you got yourself, say, the signal cable you'll need. Taking this screwdriver here, which has a magnetic tip, that's going to be really handy for getting this drive in there. So you remember this bag of parts that came with the SuperServer? You're going to want to take out the 2.5 inch bag at this point. That's the HDD bag and the 2.5 inch bag. You'll actually need both of those. At the moment, we're focused on the 2.5 inch bag. Okay, what's next? Well, you've got the drive mounted, and you're done with the 2.5 inch kit. So you can put that back in the bag of parts. Next, remember I mentioned this routing here? So it's ready for the customer to put a hard drive in this bay. Well, grab the extra one of these that you have, and we're going to go ahead and put it in the one available yellow SATA DOM port. It's really the 6th port here. So once I get that in, I'm then going to take care of routing. So obviously I'm looking at which way it goes in and putting that in place. Now routing the cable. A little nicer to go around the back and to leave that right up front and center for a second drive. Wire tie would be a nice touch, not really necessary because the cable's really not going anywhere, but putting a wire tie right around here makes it look a little nicer, and you don't really need quite that length there, so slide that down a bit, cinch that tight, fairly tight, and snip this off clean with no sharp edges to cut you. Okay, so second hard drive is installed. Sorry, second hard drive bay is prepped. First primary SSD is installed where Windows 10 is going to go. What's next? GPU. I already have a video that covers that. It also includes discussion about the speaker. Let me show you close view here. Okay, right here we've got some two-sided sticky tape. Put it in the corner of the motherboard tray there, and you have yourself a spot for the audio speaker. So at this point I'm going to cut this video off, cut over to the video that shows me installing the little PC speaker along with the GPU and the PCI slot. Number one, if you already have a speaker header installed, you want to pop that off until a little later. It'll make it easier to align the PCI card. So that's done, and there's some sticky foam tape keeping it on the bare chassis bottom there. Now, item two, keep in mind that you've got a screw right above the PCI back plate screw you're about to try to remove. So let's get a very long magnetic tip screwdriver right down in there, and we can take that PCI back plate out very quickly by just removing the screw. And this is where the magnetic tip will come in handy to avoid dropping that anywhere. Okay. Now with that freed up, taking anti-static precautions, of course, with the GPU. It's very humid where I am right now. I'm not too worried about that. What am I showing back here? I'm showing that this screw, if you back that out a few turns, but leave it in place, we now have that screw no longer protruding right where we're trying to work as we want to lower this PCI card into place. So, got the speaker header out of the way. Got the GPU where we want to carefully make sure this doesn't scratch any wire traces on the motherboard. Gently putting it where it belongs. And don't bother to clear the backplane yet for the drives. You got to line up the bottom of the slot first. So at this point we're just lining up the bottom of the slot. And now that that's in, we can go ahead and reattach the speaker header. Sorry, it's not really in, but it's kind of pretty well lined up. It'd be hard to show you this on video. I only have one tripod camera. The speaker header is now back in. And I've got the bottom of the PCI slot lined up. I'm not using much force, just a little bit of wiggle to try to make sure the bottom of the PCI slot is lined up. Once it is, things get very easy. There, just got easy. So now that the bottom is lined up, I'm able to clear the back plate, back plane of these drives here, make it straight down so when I push down, it goes right into place, ready for me to fasten the screws in the back again. So as with any screw, of course, you'll want to avoid any kind of stripping the screws or cross-threading. So you'll make sure it goes in nice and easily all the way down. And it did, and it had a nice firm stop. And then of course, to finish up, tighten that down again. And we are done. The GPU is now safely and securely installed in the SuperServer. So the GPU is now installed. You want to go ahead and take the parts and the backplate and put them in the bag of parts that the customer gets. All the stuff that came with the GPU. Flatten that VisionTech box. And this goes with the shipping box of the Supermicro in a flattened form. Alright, so we're done with that. What's the last bag of parts we have that we haven't talked about yet? And that's hard drives. So, that means if the customer bought any hard drives with their system, or if you bought hard drives with your system, or you have one of these SuperServers, yeah, you'll want to go ahead and use the HDD kit to get the screws to go ahead and mount your drives in the caddy. Okay? So that's simple enough. Next step, I'm going to go ahead and install a Vga cable. So to get started for the initial BIOS setup, we do need to see the local video. And for the moment, ignore the GPU card that we just added right over here. Okay? So that does mean getting out a monitor that has VGA. So we got a monitor. The monitor has power. The VGA cables go into the SuperServer. We're going to need USB and for the keyboard. And we're going to need to set this up initially. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the keyboard in so we can control this thing. And I'm going to grab the power cord and give the server some power. And now that we've got that set up, power button in the front, and we should get VGA output. We did. System initializing. So the first thing you'd want to do at this point would be to make sure we are at factory defaults. So I'm waiting for the signal telling me when to hit delete key on my keyboard. That will get me into the BIOS. So hit the delete key. And this is the BIOS. Okay, left arrow. Down arrow your way to restore optimized defaults. So no matter what shape the system arrived at, we load optimized defaults. Because we restored optimized defaults and the way it finds drives and stuff, I find at this point it is best to go ahead and hit F4, save and exit, to save our changes. So I'm going to do that now. F4 on the keyboard, save configuration and exit, and it reboots. What's next is grabbing a CD-ROM drive. Why? Because we have an OEM copy of Windows 10 on CD-ROM, or DVD, excuse me, and we need to attach that to the SuperServer. So it booted twice because it had to sort of reconfigure things. We said, hey, I want to go to factory defaults. So that's normal for it to boot twice like that. Okay, remember I said USB 3 if we've got it. So I'm going to use that in the back. That's the only USB 3 ports on this particular motherboard design. Now we've got ourselves a CD-ROM or DVD-ROM to get this installed. So we've rebooted. I'm hitting the delete key to get into the BIOS. We've got the Windows 10 OEM DVD inserted and attached on USB 3, and we have a keyboard attached. That's all we need to proceed. In the BIOS, there are certain settings that are not going to be ideal. Date and time you can set if you want. Happens to be correct. BIOS we're going to leave alone at 10A at this moment in time. Late August, that's fine. But take note of this. That's memory. So it found the memory, 65. Now we'll do a BurnInTest later to make sure everything's fine. And negotiate speed. We don't have to change anything there, but we do want to go over to Advanced. And then just hit Enter for boot feature. And go down to numlock, turn that off. That will annoy anyone using the system, whether it's Windows or VMware they boot. Not a great default. Power button function, also not great to go instantly off when you tap it. So I'm going to go with 4-second override there. Store on power loss, last state, I'm going to change that to stay off. Okay, ready to hit escape. Down arrow to Sata Configuration. Enter. And now I want to look through the list and notice I have some hard drives in this machine. I'm going to hit up arrow to go to the very end where I have a couple of solid state drives. So anytime you have a solid state drive in there, like these Samsung SSDs, we want it to say solid state in this screen. Hit escape. PCIe. Go in here and up arrow twice to get to VGA priority. Change it from on board to off board so that that added PCI card we just stuck in there is going to be used for video. This is important. If you don't do that, you can have some stability issues with Windows 10. So trust me that you'll want to make sure VGA priority is set to off board when you add a video card to this particular system. Escape. Right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, all the way to boot. And for boot, I'm going to change it to a UEFI system, a modern BIOS. That way, if someone goes from a 2 terabyte boot SSD for a C drive now and it becomes a 6 terabyte bigger one later, they won't have to rebuild. You can go past 2 terabytes, for instance, for your boot media. So there's lots of advantages to UEFI at this point, but actually for simplicity of this video, and then installing VMware later, it's actually simpler to just stick with UEFI for both Windows 10 and VMware ESXi 6.x at this point. So that's enough description. That's all you're changing in the BIOS, because it should find the hard drive once Windows installed, and on the first boot, should find our boot media. We'll tweak that behavior if needed, but again, trying to keep this simple and fast. Save and exit looks good. Save changes and exit, same as hitting F4. So all that work we just did, enter twice, and just wait. Okay, the beep is handy because we need to pay attention to what happens next. The boot. I do see the blue light on the DVD spun up. And notice what it's saying. It's saying, hey, I can't show video here anymore. You asked me to show video on the other device. So now it's time to pull the VGA out. So I need an HDMI cable. We're going to go from the VisionTech with this pivoting VisionTech cable. The VisionTech GPU is going to be connected to this monitor. So I'll go ahead and take care of that next. And that's going right into here. Doesn't really matter which HDMI port we use, but I'm going to put it in the bottom one. Alright, so now that's installed. Sorry you couldn't see that too well because there's a fat power cord here, but it's now plugged in. And we should get video. What I could do at this point, since I'm not quite sure what's going on and where we were, I'm going to hit reset on the front bezel. So without relying on Control-Delete doing anything, I hit reset, and we should get the SuperServer rebooting here and get video showing up soon. I just switched it to HDMI. We're in. And now we get to watch the boot sequence and see if it happens to hit the DVD. It did. So I reached over and hit the keyboard to make sure it would start booting off the install media, which in this case is DVD, OEM copy of Windows 10. So we continue to simply wait at this point. Okay, now it becomes a very normal Windows 10 install. English, US, next. Install now. Skip product key. Could actually type it from the OEM sticker too. It will need to be activated by someone. Alright, licensing, accept, and next. And finally, custom install. Now this machine has multiple hard drives. We got to be very careful. We pick the unallocated, almost 2 terabyte size drive 4. So I'm 100% sure I am installing to the correct drive at this point. I just hit next, and I walk away because it's going to take a little while. Probably a good idea to see progress, move from 0% to something other than 0% before you walk away, making sure something is happening. So I'm on another PC, and I just put a fresh USB 3.0 drive in there with nothing else on there and formatted it. And now I want to get it ready to use to deploy the SuperServer. So I paste in something called BurnInTest, Standard Edition, bit. And I'm going to install that on the SuperServer after we get Windows 10 going. But there's one other crucial file we need, and it's right over here. AMD Catalyst, well, the out-of-box experience for the end user, they're going to get those automatically. 10 gig, they might eventually for Microsoft. And finally, if they're doing RAID, they might need this adapter. But the thing they really need is Intel chipset. Otherwise, they get a bunch of yellow exclamation points all over the place. And that just doesn't look good. So this is really the only file they need. This Intel chipset 10.1.2.8, which has full Windows 10 support. And it's current as of today, here in mid-August 2015. So we're done. Look over here, head over here, and it's all set. So now I want to eject the USB media by using the tray icon to eject it, and then head back to my SuperServer. So it finished the reboot, and the setup process is now asking me what to do about the license key. Again, no internet. I'm going to do this later, and use Express settings. Okay, for name, you can do something like owner. Hopefully we're going to sysprep and do the out-of-box experience at the end of this anyway. Password we can leave blank, and hint we can leave blank. Just click on next. Alright, we have ourselves a Windows 10. The actual install took about 15 minutes. I had to take a little break. I also went and made a USB key with a couple of things we're going to need. So now that we're done with the USB 3 connection to the DVD drive, it's time to go ahead and plug in the USB drive that has only 2 things on it. This is going to be super simple. Actually, I don't want to change default behavior. I'm just going to start up Windows Explorer. And I'm going to go to the USB disk. And we're going to do this chipset install. If we double click it, it opens up. And if we click inside, it says set up chipset. I just want to point out, if you were to not do this, this machine is installed in a pretty messy state, and Windows Updates doesn't clean all this up. Video driver, it's going to handle. You're going to get an AMD driver downloaded from Microsoft Windows Update automatically on that very first time that the person, that you or the customer or whoever plugs in an Ethernet cable. So all that'll get fixed, but boy, these don't. So you really do want these chipset drivers. So I simply double click, set up chipset, and it warns me I have to extract everything first. So we just go with the wizard. And now we're ready to launch the install. Okay, we can close those distracting windows in the background. Simply hit next and accept and install leaving the mouse in the same place, and Y for yes, and just wait for it. You have successfully installed the following product. You must restart this computer for the changes to take effect. So I'm going to say restart now. Okay, we're back. You'll notice having a blank password has an advantage of an auto login. We don't have AMD drivers, but we certainly can still do burn-in testing. So get the USB disk and double click BIT STD to install burn-in standard edition, BurnInTest standard edition. Okay. Hit next. Accept the license agreement. Don't really want to review the README. I do want to launch it. And now we got to deal with licensing. So put your license key in there, or at this moment, do 30 days. You could actually save the license key text file on that same USB key if you didn't want to key it in there. Okay, I'm just going to hit continue. I do have a license key for it. And we're going to go to configuration, test selection. This is important. Why? Well, notice it was smart enough to say, I can't do 3D graphics because this person hasn't installed 3D graphics driver. So we have to deal with that. We don't actually have sound, so it wasn't smart enough to turn that off. And we don't care to try to test optical drives. So you'll notice I've turned off optical drives and sound. How about network? We don't have that plugged in at all. Okay? So yes, we're testing CPU, RAM, and 2D graphics, and disk. But not so fast. This is an SSD. It will throw terabytes on that SSD in hours. And we want to leave this test running 4 hours. So we need the license key so that this is not gray, this 15 minutes. Alright, so I'm getting that license key off of there, getting the clipboard. Key accepted, even without internet, it worked. Okay, so now we go back to configuration. 240, that's 4 hours. Again, no disk, because you will really beat the snot out of the SSD they just bought, or you just bought. So that's it. Ready to click OK. And before I leave this running overnight, in my case, I'm going to say a quick look at Device Manager is in order. So Ethernet controllers for the 10 gig you expect, but the 1 gig, they're working fine. And all that messy stuff down here in system devices just went away. It tells the end, it knows what chip it is. So that's good. And then again, I said this one will go away on their first network attach. So we're ready to just run this. I'll come back to the video tomorrow. Behind us, this is just making sure that it can run and not crash or have any problems after going for 4 hours. And there it goes. Running its 4-hour test, which is what WiredZone plans to do before boxing these up and shipping them out with Windows 10 preloaded on there for you. Clearly that went well. So the 4-hour test is complete. What's left to do? Click OK, File, Save Results Report, and browse our way to the USB drive. BurnInTest log. I'm going to call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe an invoice number, a unique identifier for that particular run on that particular serial number. The serial number is pretty long, but that could be used as well. Just some unique identifier that associates it with this machine. Now that's a text file. The prettiest one is HTM. Save that as well. And then finally, save results, report, certificate. Notice it took care of the name, it just added a new suffix. Now this one, both certificate and the results end up with the same name if you don't type something new. I'm going to add cert to the end, say. Save. That one's the one pager that can be printed on a laser printer. So we're done with that. We close BurnInTest. Now, you bought this machine, you want to reset Windows 10, but you want the Intel INF. SysPrep would be ideal. At this moment in time, SysPrep's not available. And that's okay, because if I hit the Windows key and type Advanced, we've got Change Advanced Startup Options. Reset this PC and remove everything. So we'll let that happen. The name owner should disappear and the BurnInTest install should disappear from this machine. Alright, do I want to clean the drives too? No. Just remove the files. So it's going to remove the user account called owner, for instance. So it's going into a restart. Now it's certainly safe to pull out the USB key and print out that certificate HTML file and add that to the Supermicro SuperServer box. Okay, that worked out very nicely. And the printout, I'll just point out when you go to print the certificate HTML file, it prints on 2 pages, the second one being blank. So go ahead and just say print page 101 and stick that in the shipping box and reach over and hit the power by yanking the power cord. There is no graceful shutdown in that circumstance. Control Delete, trying to get to desktop, none of that's going to work. So that's all you can do. So that ends this preparation video. Everything here after that I'm about to show you and attempt is really just testing what the out-of-box experience looks like. I went ahead and powered on again. This time I'm going to actually finish the wizard. So all of this is just showing what happens for the out-of-box experience. So in my case, it's Eastern Time Zone, which I like that it's asking because when you do the initial install, you don't even get asked that. Legal stuff. I'm going to use Express settings to keep this video simple. So that went very well. You'll notice BurnInTest is not on the desktop. And documents and downloads all empty. So that worked out just great. Now if I go to Device Manager, I mentioned that the device driver for video will be automatically installed when I plug in Ethernet. So I'll point out that the left ports are the 1 gig Ethernet. The right 2 ports are 10 gig and doing nothing on this machine for now. Okay, so now that I've plugged that in, it starts blinking like crazy. And if we have a quick peek here, okay, The home user would typically say yes for this. What's going to happen is the screen will blank. And to get a better grip of what's going on, if I click on, or right click on the tray, say Task Manager, and more details, performance, Ethernet, you'll see Windows Update is clearly doing its thing and bringing down a bunch of updates. Now disk 4, which is my C drive in this machine because I have a bunch of other disks, it's busy and the screen flickers just as I predicted as the video driver goes in there. Excellent, automatically 1920 1080. So basically all you got to do is boot this machine, wait 3-4 minutes, and you got yourself high resolution at the native resolution of the monitor generally. All the way up to 4K, all the way up to 3 4K displays. If you look at Device Manager to the left, you'll see AMD Radeon. That concludes this video of the unboxing and assembly and setting up the BIOS and installing Windows 10, and then just working or playing on your new Windows 10 machine, which is a very pleasant out-of-box experience. Thank you for watching and for visiting TinkerTry'd.com.